Laptop computer spins onto the screen, opens, and displays ATP Education Program webinar series, closes, and then spins off the screen.
Hello and welcome to this video on executive functioning. Today we're going to talk about what is executive functioning and how can assistive technology help students who struggle. My name is Cassie Frost and I am going to be presenting this series of videos on all topics executive functioning and how assistive technology can help support it. I'm an assistive technology specialist, a behavior specialist, a problem solver, and a collector of things that may come in handy, and a believer that everyone can learn. If you have any questions as we go through today, please always feel free to reach out to me. My Twitter handle is here on this screen, and I will include my email also at the end. Because this is a video series, take advantage of the fact that you can fast forward, move through things a little quicker, or you can rewind or pause to hear things again. Today's session is going to talk about executive functioning as a whole and do a brief overview of what that is, and then talk specifically about assistive technology and how assistive technology and executive functioning work together. So in order to get started, let's get all on the same page about what is executive functioning anyway. Executive functioning is one of those rather big words that sounds like it has a lot involved, and it does, but most of the things that qualify as executive functioning and fall under this category are things that you're very familiar with. So we're going to start here with the ASHA definition of executive functioning. Executive functioning, as related to schools, includes all self-management skills that students need to succeed in a classroom. More specifically, it involves the ability to make goals, plan steps required to achieve those goals, and then execute the plans. For example, attention, focus, planning, organization, working memory, recall, self-regulating emotions, and self-monitoring all fall under the umbrella of executive functions. As you can tell, this is a really big definition, and there's a lot of information here. We're going to simplify this just a little bit to make things a little bit clearer. Let's go with a simple definition. Executive functioning is how you get yourself together to do the things you need to do, and that includes learning. So think about everything from the time you get up in the morning until you go to bed at night, all of the things and the steps that you take in order to get the things done that you need to do. All along the way, you are using executive functioning skills. Just like in that ASHA definition, you are focusing, you're making plans, you're staying organized, you're paying attention. All of those things are things that we do all day, every day. This can be both a really positive thing because we work with students on this all the time, but also can be a struggle because we assume that everybody kind of learns these things together. So sometimes it can be a little bit harder to pick out the students who struggle in these areas and what we can do to support them. So some examples of executive functioning skills going well. Planning a family vacation. If you can plan a family vacation, you are using tons of executive functioning skills in a very positive way. Making a list, maybe before going to the grocery store. Bonus points on having great executive functioning if you remember to take the list with you. Coming to school with all of your materials. I'm assuming, or I'm sure, that as soon as I said that, you thought of a couple of students who typically come to school without their things. Even though you remind them, even though that by the grade they're in, maybe they should be able to bring them, but they often forget things. Again, that's one of those areas of executive functioning that perhaps that student is struggling with. And then attending to a task. And again, we can all think of our students or even times that ourselves where we've really struggled with that. And as we go through, we're going to talk a little bit about how kind of some executive functioning skills may ebb and flow a little bit based off of stress levels and environmental factors. So parts of executive functioning that we are really going to focus in on in this series is working memory, inhibitory control, cognitive flexibility, organization, and time management. Let's go back and look at these just a little bit closer. Working memory is the process of taking in information, encoding it in your brain, getting rid of the things that you don't need, hanging on to the things that you do, and being able to recall that when you need them. We may all talk about, oh, I'm really struggling, I forgot that, oh, I didn't remember that. And we all know that when there's a lot going on, or maybe we're stressed, our memory doesn't work as well. But for some of our students, memory is a struggle all of the time. And this is an area then of executive functioning that we need to find as educators ways to support students. When we talk about inhibitory control, we don't often use that word. Instead, we'll often call it attention. That student struggles with paying attention. And again, as I said that, I'm sure you had students that popped into your mind. Paying attention is something we expect of all students throughout the day in a classroom. We expect them to pay attention to the assignment or the teacher or a video or what's happening around them. For a student who struggles with attention, a classroom can be a very, very, very difficult place because there's a lot to see and to be involved in and to be thinking of. And if they struggle with paying attention to the thing they are supposed to, classroom can be a very difficult place. Cognitive flexibility, again, we don't necessarily use that term as often, but we may talk about processing. Or another word I like using this is switching. So how quickly can your students' brain jump from one topic to another or one task to another? Often in a classroom, we'll ask students to switch from one activity to another very quickly without even necessarily realizing we're doing it. For example, if you have a student or a class and you have asked them to do some silent reading. So they've gotten out their books and they are reading. Then perhaps you say, okay, guys, hold on just 1 second. I'm going to interrupt you. I just want to let you know we're going to go to lunch 5 minutes early today. So make sure that you're ready for that. Okay, you can go back to reading, right? It was innocent enough. You interrupted for just a quick second. That's all great. However, for a student who struggles with processing or that cognitive flexibility, they just had to switch from reading to listening and back to reading again very quickly. For a student who struggles with that cognitive flexibility, that's going to be very, very difficult. When we talk about organization, this one tends to jump out in our minds a little bit quicker. A student who struggles with organization oftentimes is a little more obvious. Not always, but tends to be a little more obvious. This is because a student who struggles with organization may have the folders that are completely overflowing, or the desk that when it's opened, things fall out of. Or the student that is constantly missing their pencil or their items for school or their shoes for gym class. When we talk about time management, oftentimes a student who is struggling with time management will be the student who could be late to class. It could be the student who is, asking to go to the restroom because maybe they didn't have time during passing time because they lost track of that time. It could be the student that didn't realize the assignment was due today because they hadn't had time to get to it yet. And oftentimes, or sometimes, that may end up starting to get looked as a behavior issue, that a student didn't use the bathroom during break, or the fact that they didn't get their assignment in on time, when there could be some underlying time management issues as far as executive functioning. And again, we need to start thinking about what can we do to support. So, we now know about executive functioning. Let's think a little bit more about assistive technology and how those two things interact so we can begin to look at some supports for these students that can help them out in the classroom. So when we talk about assistive technology, again, we're going to kind of go back to that definition just because I think it's a good place to start for us to be on the same page. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA of 2004, defines an AT device as any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially, off the shelf, modified, or customized, that's used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of a child with a disability. What this tells us is that if a student is struggling with executive functioning, and that is part of their disability, we absolutely can use assistive technology to help support that student. So again, let's take a look back at these areas of working memory, attention, processing, organization, and time management. When we're talking about AT for memory, it's pretty easy for us to start thinking about things that we use to help support our memory every day. And just like a lot of assistive technologies, many of these tools are pretty mainstream. They may be things that we use ourselves or we teach our students to use every day. However, again, if we have a student that requires these tools in order to be successful in the classroom, it's crossed that line from a support or something that we enjoy using or something that helps us to assistive technology and something that is required for that student in order to be successful. So when we're talking about memory, we're talking about things like checklists or planners or using a digital tool like a cell phone for alarms. I know personally, I love alarms on my cell phone. Alarms on my cell phone help me get where I need to go. Could I do those things without my cell phone? Probably, it'd be a lot harder. So for me, it's probably not crossed that line into assistive technology, but there are a few of my students that it has crossed that line. Without having those auditory alarms to remind them of what they need to do, they would not get to class on time or bring the things that they need to with them. So again, assistive technology for memory can be something as simple as a checklist, a planner, or even reminders on something like a cell phone. When we're talking about attention, this can be everything from the way that a classroom is laid out to fidgets, things that a student may hold in their hands to kind of take away part of the random attention that may go everywhere. Example for a student with ADHD. If they're paying attention to so many things, sometimes having a fidget takes part of that attention away so that they can focus on the teacher as well. Closing blinds, so kind of a limited environment to take away some of those extra external stimuli from a student. We can also talk about processing. So the information for a student, how they can take it in, what they can do with it, how quickly they can switch from thing to thing. So examples here may be using something like a clock to be able to show students from this time to this time, this is going to happen. And now from this time to this time, something else is going to happen. A lot of times we'll talk about that as visuals or front loading are keywords that you may start hearing if you're thinking about or working with a student who struggles with executive functioning in the area of processing. Also, along with that, writing. We know from an educational standpoint that writing down notes helps commit things to memory. For some of our students, it can also help with processing. We don't often think about requiring a student to write things down or asking them to write things down unless it's more for memory. But for some of our students, it also helps with processing. When we talk about assistive technology for organization, again, this becomes a little more obvious. We're really good at providing tools for our students to help with organization. And most of our students do very, very well with it. We teach them our classroom system for organization, and they kind of take it and run off with it, and it goes pretty well. Now, again, depending on the student and the age, sometimes we may need to do some reminders or we may need to help support that. However, there are going to be specific students that you work with who need organizational support a step further. They may need a custom system of folders or a custom item. I used in a wallet as an example here, or a backpack or a pencil case that is set up in a specific way to help students with organization. Again, for most students, organizational systems are helpful, but they may not be crossing that line into assistive technology. Again, everybody likes organization and organizational systems that work, but certain students will need that extra step of having a very specific system to them that works in a specific way in order for them to keep their items organized and to be able to continue to move through their educational environment and their day and to be successful. And along with that, kind of like organization is pretty obvious, time management is another one. We always see students who are struggling with time management. This is a skill that we work on as we get older, as we grow. I know plenty of adults who struggle with time management. I can struggle with time management. I'm sure we've all been there. But there are students who really struggle with time management to the point that it really interferes with their educational day. Oftentimes we will see in IEPs written in things like extended time. We may see things like assignments broken up into small pieces. All of those things are in there to help support students who struggle with time management. From an assistive technology standpoint, there's a wide variety of alarms and clocks and timers, both digital and some low-tech things that really can help make time management a little bit easier and show the passage of time a little bit clearer. And again, in later sessions in this video series, we're going to go specifically and kind of spend more time talking specifically about time management and those different types of tools. And then also things like planners. So different planners, calendars, things that front load or show what could be coming up. also can become assistive technology for time management, again, if it is required for the student in order to be successful. As we've talked about these, I've tried going really broad and really bringing in examples of assistive technology for executive functioning that maybe you've experienced in your life, not only in your classroom. However, as you look around your classroom, you'll discover there's many tools built into your classroom that you use every day to support students with executive functioning. What I would challenge you to do is the next time that you see a student who appears to be struggling with time management, attention, flexibility, organization, all of those things, I would challenge you to look at the systems that you already have in place and then look a step further to see if there's something that should be added or modified or changed to that specific student's system or world in order to help support them through the day. If there is something, it may be crossing that line into assistive technology. And there are many tools out there that can help students who are struggling in these areas. So while we may be more familiar with working with assistive technology for other things, it's really important to start looking at and broadening our grasp of tools that can actually help support our students who are struggling with executive functioning. Because as they grow older and move on to life after school, whatever that may be, those deficits still may exist, and they're going to need to learn how to work with those executive functioning supports to be solid members of our society. If you have any questions about what I've talked about today, you can always reach out to me at cfrost@disruptiveteaching.com. And you can also reach me at my Twitter at cfrost_disteach. I look forward to you joining us for further videos on executive functioning. And as I've said, we're going to spend a lot more time kind of going into each of these areas and looking at physical tools, both high and low tech, to help support executive functioning. So definitely check out the rest of this series. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you for watching. For more information on the ATP Education Program, please visit our website at atp.nebraska.gov/education or email us at atp.education@nebraska.gov.